Suddenly, with marvelous accuracy, going with him at times into the cellar to watch him stuff a goose. And suddenly there was Lawrence, and there were we, being stuffed, for who knows what feast. Well, on stuffing a goose. Is this fame, then, and what it is to be really alive? To go on living after flesh, having failed, has been officially hauled away? To cast a moment's spell upon some distant man and girl, a feeling of familiarity in a gust of fragrance in a summer's night, of loneliness made roomier as they recall his anguish, as though flesh alone, one time and place, one wife, a single set of friends, were too confining. And that life must be let out to mine its basic cadence finally in our pondering of it, free of any obligation save the pleasure that we take in it. My father was a great hand at stuffing geese. In the cellar dark, he'd keep one penned. Knees grappling it, he'd ram a special mash with dippers of water down its throat. In time, that crate began to bulge. Past waddling, Goose managed only belchy squawks. We knew it ready. Somewhere in all this, I have a sense of what it is to be really alive. Somewhere in the celebration of that goose, throned on a shiny platter, for its mellow crackling skin a jovial martyr, piping savors of a life well lived, our heart's gladness in the occasion of picking the juicy meat from the sides and the bones, in that and remembering the sense abides. Well, now let's see what I can say out of Princeton, my Princeton poems. Let's see how I look as against my Bard poems. Of course, let's be fair, these are not only more recent, but less pondered and, I won't say plundered. A poem called The Life Of. If I had a blackboard, well, I do have a blackboard. Has anyone some chalk, please? It's the life of, and then 3 dots. In other words, you put in whom you like, even though initially it's, of course, the life, I don't know why I say of course, it's The Life of Johnson. But the title is The Life Of with 3 dots. I hope you'll soon see why I have it so. The poem consists of 3 sections, 3 people, a man talking, the friend answering, and the wife of the first man then interrupting both of them. The life of. So there we were, stuck in a Lazio, that's a Italian Mediterranean town. So there we were, stuck in a Lazio all that rotten winter, in a rented house, no one around but puffed up Germans, and nothing to read beyond a pair I can't abide, Boswell and Johnson, the latter worse than his crony, and nothing to do but struggle on through that wretched life of, how I loathed it. Ah, my friend, I say, that's what more or less it always comes to. 1 book to a customer. A tempest raging through their lines, some, if they've time for it, wonder how they'll ever learn to follow, let alone unravel, their chaotic plot. Others, it is true, are luckier. Richer text, pictures every second page. But all are stuck in their own Lazio, like it or not, waiting there, flopped open for whatever climaxes may come along. This aside from sudden hurlings of the book across the room, with 1,000 others pulped or fed into a roaring fire, that each syllable a happening at last, the words all crackle. Actually, my friend's wife now breaks in, after the first 2 summer months, after the Germans left, the gaudy decorations nailed up on the shops for them pulled down, and the Italians gradually appearing, we grew to love the town, rotten winter and all, admitted. Our garden, with its crazy tangled blooming, roses, geraniums, and the rest, through shattered bottles, cans, and every kind of bitter wind, the narrow, dark, malarial streets, at the end of which, on our long walks, the sea glittered like a blaze burst through a tunnel, the forlorn little fishing fleet, going out each night as we went to bed, and at dawn, returning as we woke, threw open the shutters, and watched behind it, a red heaped up on the creamy water, the sun rising, as though towed in part of the catch. Later, too, the mountain that we loved to climb, looming over the town, and high enough, with its paths twisting to the top, so that one seemed to see a new day previewed there, just as it was forging forth, eye to eye with the moon. Well, the poem I thought was finished, and I sent it off, and whomever I sent it off to thought it was finished too. Then I happened, good misfortune, I happened to show it to Miss Brandeis. She read it quickly, and she said, well, and then I wrote another part. One must be, I'll try not to show this to anyone else as we go on. And so this next part is called The Life of, 3 dots, and then as it's done in proper literary circles, The Life of, 3 dots, C-O-N-T period, parenthesis, continued. And I should tell you, the poem is talking. Since, after one quick look, another friend of yours dared say, this poem seems to need some resolution, I, a kind of party of the 4th part, stand up to insist the poem is satisfactory. Some lines, the business about a new day, etc., are a little hard to swallow. But at least you resisted gab of chariots, Apollo and his nags, chafing up a bit, and all that. Even if you couldn't, as ever, withstand your blather about books. Once more, one whiff of Germans and off you go like an old horse to a blaze. Ah, dear. Off you go like an old horse to a blaze. Sure, the title fits, just right with its anonymity, for those millions raised, disposed of in a wake of smoke. So the mountain in your poem is clear enough, and I am here to offer exegesis. Like the 3 propping one another in the poem, you stand on them. On the pair your friend could not abide, as on the trappings you drag in, that fleet, and whatever the weather, flowers blooming away, pig-headed as Boswell with his Johnson, in their very doggedness drawing light from one another. So you and your woman, whirling through space with no ropes, no net, and least of all a trapeze beyond each other. As I am doing now, the latest overlooker telling you, as I stand on you, how much you supervise the rest. And it continues, like the shuffling pages of the sea, that in different light, and by the lights of him who looks, look differently. Since Mr. McLuhan is so important today, and we all seem to be being massaged, I thought I'd borrow a bit of that, and I did it very obliquely. One must never do it any other way. I decided not to refer to him directly, but to refer to his teacher, his major teacher, I suppose, though that is perhaps more knowing of me than I have a right to. That is Buckminster, R. Buckminster Fuller. Bucky, as he's known, is quite a man, as some of you must know. So I decided to title the poem out of him, The Ultimate Anti-Entropy. I must admit that phrase enchanted me with a kind of Valerian vitality. Who can top a phrase like that? The ultimate anti-entropy. Science is yet to be dealt with by poets. Indeed. The ultimate anti-entropy, and I have a footnote, according to Norbert Wiener and R. Buckminster Fuller, man is the ultimate anti-entropy. Now, as far as I understand, we have to counteract entropy, which is, as you know, the dissipation of energy. And so, very obligingly, we have discovered that if there is entropy, there surely must be anti-entropy. And if there is anti-entropy, who better than man looks after it? So man, you see, is a kind of storage battery. And then as I thought of this, I thought, well, from one point of view, if man is a storage battery, then what are the real storage batteries of the storage battery but his art? Think of a little poem, that great storage battery, that marvelous anti-entropy. So I called the poem The Ultimate Anti-Entropy. But I wasn't satisfied. I felt the poem ought to be guarded, beginning and end. So I quote from R. Buckminster Fuller, and he says in awesome terms, unity is plural, and at minimum two. I must admit I felt terribly courageous to go on after that. Unity is plural, and at minimum two. I wake up nights feeling so companioned. Unity is plural, and at minimum, of course with me unity is single, but you know. Well, then a poem which, since I was very much interested at the time that I wrote this, in modern theories of art, more perhaps than in modern art, since we are told that the theories are, after all, much more interesting than the art, and the art is merely at best an illustration of the art, I then wrote this little poem. Whether one paints 5 Helens after some much experienced woman, or develops one, his beau ideal, from the 5 most lovely untouched virgins of Crotona, such Cicero's account of Zeuxis' purest practice, or laboriously patches her together, cheek by jowl, out of all the women he has shuffled through, is not their end the same? So even he who will not let the name of Helen, or woman for that matter, be attached to what he splotches on the canvas, refusing to be tamed by recognition. For he claims he paints a painting, not a landscape, apples, females, deems he's plucked from out his headlong brain and brush a universal as it is a most unique, concrete past any momentary model. And though we may wish to celebrate the fleeting, or applaud the theory as it lords it over its bleak and boring product, Zeus, we recall, laid all, this every time, his eggs in one small basket. The consequence, in the most famous case, was a Helen who inherited her papa's quality, most jovial. Being so promiscuous, so radiantly loose, that we have hardly seen the last of her. The sparks her eyes shot forth are seeds that will not die. Men far flung still warm their hands, their hearts, and more at the thought of her, as at the Troy the flint of flesh against the tinder of a god produced. Helen, it seems, is more herself the more she's reproduced. A poem called Far Out, Far In. Perhaps I should help you visualize it. It's thoroughly scenic, after its opening, we are very much, at least I hope we are, on a beach with a party, and we watch some part of the party doing one thing and another part, one single member of the party doing another. Then after we have finished with her, we turn to two lovers who naturally close the poem. Far out, far in. What we go out for, we often do not know, though some are lucky thinking that they do. Like those priests in their white cassocks diving into the canals of Venice after the cross, or those explorers plunged perverse enough through swamps and jungles, most at home when lost. And those luckiest of all, perhaps, gone out simply for the pleasure, limbs set, mind of going, as from this beach a stand of pine trees closes in, protected past that by a mountain range. On stilt-like poles, nets dangling shimmer in the wind, coral crimson, minnow golden, seaweed green. In the fish one wishes to lure, one must anticipate varieties of taste. Nearby, glass knobs for floaters that craze the sunlight, also mats adazzle with fish laid out to dry, and boats in whose high-pooped shade men, women, and children sort the day's many-sided catch. But now, newspapers spread out on the ground, rainbow awnings strung up from the trees, the picnic, a festival of swimming begins. Food taken, some half awash in the frothy surf, a few up to their chins go through the motions of swimming, their arms a lazy mimic of the waves. But there, far out, near the bigger seagoing fishing boats at anchor, one ambitious swimmer shows off her skill. Hair flashing as the sun catches, already low on arms as on the water, fish dart to her, and as if excited by her presence, her performance, no less than their habit at this hour, frolic, in pairs, sometimes in schools that seem one rainbowed curve, leap high into the air. Then, even as the day goes down, sinking somewhere, a glittering treasure, at the bottom of the sea, the swimmer, done with swimming, by some artful strokes, sure of herself as of her course, returns to shore. Whatever she was after, as she stands dripping yet serene, a last reflection on the sand, she has, for a time at least, found it. So, night glinting round like gentle waves, two swum far out, far in, through one another's arms, desire briefly routed, drift upon the moonlit current before sleep, and as the mind goes out, exploring memories, sensations like deposits in the veins, the far out lively places where the body's lain, elations gather, sun and wind and water freshened, able so intrepid to remain. Well, to finish, I'd like to do something, perhaps because I have a feeling that I am somewhat at home, something that I rarely do, and that is read right up against the minute. A poem I wrote 2 days ago and a poem I wrote this morning. You never know what's the last moment. This is the 2-day-old poem. This letter. And it is about a letter, as you will hear, which once seemed to be a flame in the hand for what it contained, and which now lies there a sad ash. A very fateful letter it was, in a way. In other words, I do have a very particular letter in mind. Now that letter is on its own, catching at me at unexpected times, like a kite high in the sky torn loose from its tether. Or is it a wing blading the sun? Like a last patch of snow in a bush that seems to be struggling free triumphantly of a long involved affair with winter. Once a whole flock of feelings, roaming, paused to pasture in its lines, and by a sudden wind as of danger, panic would take them, the acrid smell, perhaps, of gathering fire, or else an intense calm would settle on them, and as though to a shepherd's pipe they would troop in a docile order to lap at a lucid pool in the letter's center, or ring around an altar for one of the season's rites, winter, waiting to be sacrificed to and fed. One by one, no doubt, and then in numbers, that flock, pounced on by a passing ravenous wolf, harried by neglect, disappeared. Now this letter is indeed on its own. I open its dry, rustling pages like brown, sighing leaves, and a melancholy grips me as in a temple whose stained sanctuaries are deserted, whose spaces echo with lean, empty winds. What troubles me most is the forgetting, the poignancy of once everlasting passions and sins. And then, the rawest of them all, if I break down in the middle, it's out of courtesy to you and to me. It's called The Way It Works Out. It started, well, I don't know, it's too near for me to say how it started. Actually, I do remember I got it wholesale from two friends. You must always choose your friends very carefully. I'm a great ransacker of friends. One from one man, one from another. Well, anyway, the thing that did start it, though, I had trouble sleeping early this morning. A pigeon was at me. And as I woke, suddenly this thing began, and I heard this first curious little rhythm. How shall I say it, the way it works out? That was all. How shall I say it, the way it works out? Sometimes, like a bug, one gets stuck in a dark, a passage of black, and then seems to be all there is. But then one steps back, and he sees how big it is. There, traveling together and side by side, a storm and a day, whole enough to outfit a country. Thus, for a moment at least, before he plunges into himself again, like a bug lost, wrapped up in one crinkly leaf. Haven't you seen how many make the most? Oh, they chart it, draggle back and forth, count every brown twig, respond to each little gust and glimmer of their grief. Yes, we had traveled all those miles, countries whirling by. In one day we had whipped through 3 states like somebody's pinwheel. And there we were, smack in the middle of a little dusty Mexican village, wondering why we had ever thought to come, how we'd ever get home again. And suddenly a troop of 9 little kids, brown as the earth, dashed up around us, grabbing our hands, with cries dragging us out to a stubbly field, one limp cow by, to play football. Thank you. Yes, let's end up coolly. Yes, it's interesting. This too owes a great deal to a friend. Some years ago, I don't know, some of you may know him, the then Registrar of Vard, Buzz Gummery, very sweet, gentle, and moving man, good friend of mine indeed, told me the substance of this. He claimed that this was a true story out of his own family, and I was more than willing to believe it. It was, of course, a good, staunch New England family, and therefore it seemed to me to be entitled to this story. I called it a Gothic Tale because I thought I saw its affiliations with the... Remember, the Gothic Tale was, I suppose, the pornographic excitements of the Victorians. They too had to have that. And after all, what could be more exciting than a monk on the loose? Or at least so they thought. Now, there are no monks here visibly, but this is a modern version of it. I should tell you only one thing. In the last part, someone speaks, and he, it's hard for you to see without the quotation marks. I've not yet learned altogether how to put quotation marks in my voice. He is pondering this whole scene, a Gothic tale. Framed by our window, skaters, winding in and out the wind, as water reeling, so kept in motion, on a glittering edge, spin out a gilded ceiling. Fish, reflecting glow for glow, saints around the sun, are frozen with amazement, just one pane below. Skates flash like stars, so madly whirling, one can hardly tell which is sky and which the watery floor. One night, two straight-laced couples, a footman over them, rode out in a dappled horse-drawn sleigh onto the river, a moonlit lark. The ice broke, and they, sleigh, footman and all, riding in state, rode straight on into the lidded water. That winter, all winter, folks twirled over them, who, framed in lace, frost the furs, the shiny harness and their smiles, the fires that keep the place, sat benignly watching. 1 foot out, 1 foot in, are we real? Thought one. We who wander sheepishly in dreams, or they, the really sleepless eyes under us. And every night, who knows? Our laughter troubles us like dreams. Who skates? 1,000 watchfires, the stars above, peering through the pane.